What happens when a most feared creature in the galaxy becomes a desperate mother? When every advanced civilization turns their back on a plea for help? When the only hope lies in the hands of someone the universe considers insignificant? In the depths of space, where dragons rule entire star systems and humans are barely tolerated as maintenance workers, one janitor is about to prove that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can reshape the cosmos itself. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a night shift cleaner on Terminus Station, who heard a cry for help that every admiral, diplomat, and scientist chose to ignore. What he discovered in Storage Bay 47 would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about dragons, humans, and the true meaning of courage. Prepare for a journey where underestimated becomes unstoppable, where compassion conquers fear, and where one human's refusal to walk away changes the fate of two species forever. Warning: this story contains scenes of interspecies cooperation, unexpected friendship, scientific impossibilities made possible, and humans being absolutely incredible when it matters most. Marcus Chun pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridors of Terminus Station at 3 in the morning, the only sound echoing through the massive structure being the soft hum of recycled air and the gentle squeak of his cart's left wheel. He had been working the night shift for 6 months now, ever since the Galactic Council had finally allowed humans to take maintenance jobs on their outer rim stations. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid better than anything back on Earth, and Marcus needed the money for his sister's medical treatments. The station was a marvel of alien engineering, built by the Andromedans with their signature crystalline architecture that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. During the day, it bustled with representatives from dozens of species conducting trade, diplomacy, and research. But at night, it belonged to the maintenance crews, and tonight, that meant Marcus and his mop bucket. He had just finished cleaning the diplomatic quarters when he heard it. A sound so low and mournful that it seemed to come from the station's very bones. Marcus paused, tilting his head to listen. The sound came again, a deep rumbling that made his chest vibrate. He had heard recordings of whale songs back on Earth that had the same haunting quality, but this was different. This was intelligent, purposeful, and absolutely desperate. Following the sound, Marcus found himself in a section of the station he had never cleaned before. The corridors here were wider, built to accommodate larger species, and the lighting was dimmed to a soft blue that indicated a restricted area. His cleaning authorization technically covered the entire station, but he had never had reason to venture this far into the storage sectors. The sound grew louder as he approached Storage Bay 47. According to his scanner, the bay was supposed to be empty, scheduled for deep cleaning next week. But the readings were clearly wrong. Something massive was inside, and it was making sounds that spoke directly to something primal in Marcus's human heart. It was the sound of a mother in distress. Marcus hesitated outside the massive bay doors. Protocol demanded he report any anomalies to station security immediately. But something about the quality of that sound, the raw emotion in it, made him pause. During his 6 months on Terminus Station, he had learned that humans were considered little more than useful pets by most alien species. They were tolerated for their adaptability and willingness to do jobs that others found beneath them, but their opinions and concerns were rarely taken seriously. If he called this in, security would take hours to respond. They would follow procedure, file reports, and probably dismiss whatever was in there as a minor technical glitch. But that sound wasn't a glitch. That was pain, fear, and desperate need rolled into something that transcended species barriers. Marcus made a decision that would change his life forever. He accessed the bay doors with his maintenance credentials. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a space large enough to house a small spacecraft. And indeed, there was a spacecraft of sorts inside, but it wasn't like anything Marcus had ever seen. It was organic, flowing, with surfaces that seemed to shift between scale and metal. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely impossible according to everything he knew about engineering. But it wasn't the ship that made Marcus's jaw drop. It was the creature curled around it. She was massive, easily 30 feet from nose to tail, with scales that shimmered between deep emerald and midnight blue. Her head was elegant and serpentine, mounted on a neck that curved with impossible grace. Her wings, folded tight against her body, still spanned nearly the width of the storage bay. She was, without question, the most magnificent thing Marcus had ever seen. She was also clearly dying. The dragon's breathing was labored, her scales dull with pain and exhaustion. One of her front legs was wrapped protectively around something small and still, and it was from her throat that the heart-rending sounds were coming. When she noticed Marcus standing in the doorway, her great golden eyes fixed on him with an intelligence that was startlingly human. For a moment, neither moved. Marcus knew he should run. Dragons were the apex species of the galaxy, rulers of entire star systems, possessed of technology and power that made human civilization look like children playing with sticks. They were also notoriously aggressive toward other species, especially humans, whom they considered barely evolved primates. But this dragon wasn't showing aggression. She was showing desperation. Slowly, carefully, Marcus stepped into the storage bay. The dragon watched him approach, but made no threatening moves. As he drew closer, he could see what she was protecting so fiercely. Nestled against her chest was a much smaller dragon, no bigger than a large dog, its scales a lighter shade of green. The little dragon's eyes were closed, and its breathing was so shallow that Marcus could barely detect it. "Oh," Marcus whispered, understanding flooding through him. "You're trying to save your baby." The great dragon's head turned toward him at the sound of his voice. Those golden eyes studied his face with an intensity that seemed to look straight through to his soul. Then, in a voice like distant thunder, she spoke. "Please." The word was perfectly formed, though tinged with an accent that spoke of vocal cords designed for sounds no human throat could make. "Please on my child." Marcus had known dragons could speak human languages, but hearing it was something else entirely. The intelligence in her voice was unmistakable, as was the pain. This wasn't some savage beast. This was a mother watching her child die. "What happened?" Marcus asked, moving closer still. The dragon could have killed him with a single swipe of her claws, but something told him he was safer in this moment than he had ever been in his life. "Poisoned," the dragon replied, her great head turning toward her child. "During the peace talks, someone put something in the water we were given. I have been flying for 3 days, seeking help. Every medical facility, every hospital, every research station. They all refuse to treat a dragon child. They say it's not their problem." Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. The galactic community prided itself on its medical ethics, on the principle that all sentient life deserved care. But apparently, that principle had limits. "What about dragon medical facilities?" he asked. The dragon's expression grew even more pained. "The nearest is 6 days away. My child will not survive 6 days. He needs help now, or he will die in my arms while I watch helplessly." Marcus looked at the small dragon, so still and fragile against his mother's protective embrace. He thought of his sister back on Earth, fighting her own battle against a disease that human medicine couldn't cure. He thought of the helpless rage he felt every day, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy there might be a cure, but humans weren't advanced enough or important enough to access it. "I'm not a doctor," Marcus said quietly. "I'm just a janitor." "You are human," the dragon replied, and there was something in her voice that Marcus couldn't quite identify. "Humans are different. They do things others will not do. They find ways when others say there are no ways. This is why I came here, to this human station." Marcus wanted to laugh at the irony. Terminus Station was barely 10% human. It was built and operated primarily by Andromedans, with Cetians handling most of the advanced technical work. Humans were the cleanup crew, the manual laborers, the ones who did the jobs that automation couldn't handle and that other species found too menial. But as he looked at this magnificent creature, humbled by desperation and clinging to hope that probably should have died hours ago, Marcus realized something. Maybe being underestimated wasn't always a disadvantage. Maybe being dismissed by the galaxy's great powers meant he could move through their world in ways they never expected. "What kind of poison?" he asked. The dragon's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected the question. "The medical scans I was able to obtain before being turned away showed cellular breakdown at the mitochondrial level, something that attacks the energy production systems. It is sophisticated." Marcus nodded, thinking fast. He might not be a doctor, but he had spent years studying biochemistry before dropping out of university to care for his sick sister. And 6 months of cleaning a research station had taught him more about alien biology than any human textbook ever could. "Cellular energy production," he mused. "That's not a dragon-specific system. Most carbon-based life forms use similar processes. The poison might be species agnostic." "Yes," the dragon said. And for the first time, Marcus heard a note of hope in her voice. "But every doctor I spoke to said they could not treat a dragon because they did not understand dragon physiology. Because they were thinking like specialists," Marcus realized. "They were looking at your child as a dragon first, instead of as a living being with biological systems they might actually understand." He looked around the storage bay, his mind racing. He had access to the station's medical supply rooms. Not the advanced equipment reserved for senior species, but the basic supplies used for humans and other lesser races. If the poison was attacking basic cellular function, then maybe basic medicine was exactly what was needed. "I have an idea," Marcus said, "but I need to know more about his symptoms, and I need to examine him more closely." The dragon studied Marcus's face for a long moment. Then, with movements so gentle they seemed impossible for a creature of her size, she carefully lifted her child and placed him on the floor in front of Marcus. Up close, the little dragon was even more beautiful. His scales had an iridescent quality that made them seem to glow with inner light. His breathing was rapid and shallow, and when Marcus carefully opened one of his eyes, the pupil was dilated and unresponsive. "How long since the poisoning?" Marcus asked. 18 hours. Marcus nodded, running through everything he knew about toxicology. 18 hours was long enough for a poison to do serious damage, but if the little dragon was still alive, then his body was fighting it. That was good. That meant there was still time. "I need to run some tests," Marcus said. "Basic blood chemistry, cellular analysis. Nothing invasive, just diagnostic. But I'll need to take him to the medical lab." The dragon mother's entire body tensed. "I will not be separated from my child. The labs are designed for human-sized patients," Marcus explained gently. "You won't fit through the doors. But I promise you, I will not let anything happen to him." For a moment, the dragon said nothing. Marcus could see the war playing out behind her golden eyes. Every instinct she must be screaming at her not to trust a human with her most precious treasure. But every minute that passed was another minute closer to losing her child forever. "You give me your word," she said finally. "As a human, I have heard that human word bonds are significant." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I give you my word. I will treat your child as if he were my own family. I will not rest until either I've saved him or I've exhausted every possibility." The dragon studied his face for what felt like an eternity. Then, with infinite care, she lifted her child again. "His name is Zephyr," she said quietly. "It means gentle wind in your language. I chose it because I hoped he would grow up to bridge the gaps between species, to be a force for peace." Marcus felt the weight of that trust settle on his shoulders like a mantle. This wasn't just about saving a life anymore. This was about proving that humans could be more than the galaxy expected. This was about showing that sometimes the most important solutions came from the most unexpected places. "Hello, Zephyr," Marcus said softly to the unconscious dragonet. "Let's get you feeling better." As Marcus carefully took the small dragon in his arms, he felt the mother's eyes burning into him. The trust she was placing in him was staggering. He was a janitor, a human maintenance worker who cleaned alien toilets for a living. But in this moment, he was also the only hope for a mother's love and a child's life. The real work was about to begin. Marcus carried Zephyr through the winding corridors of Terminus Station, moving as quickly as he dared while keeping his precious cargo stable. The little dragon was surprisingly light for his size, weighing no more than a medium-sized dog, but there was an unmistakable warmth radiating from his scales that spoke of an internal fire that was slowly being extinguished. The medical bay designated for human use was small and basic compared to the advanced facilities reserved for senior species, but it had everything Marcus needed for initial diagnostics. More importantly, it had something the other facilities lacked: complete privacy. No one monitored the human medical bay during night shifts unless there was an emergency. Marcus gently placed Zephyr on the examination table, adjusting the temperature controls to account for the dragon's higher baseline body heat. The little creature's breathing had grown even more labored during the journey, and Marcus could see a faint tremor in his limbs that suggested neurological involvement. "Okay, buddy," Marcus whispered, "let's figure out what someone did to you." He began with basic vital signs, adapting the human equipment to work with dragon physiology. Zephyr's heart rate was rapid but irregular, his blood pressure dangerously low. When Marcus drew a small blood sample, the fluid that filled the collection tube was a brilliant crystalline blue that seemed to sparkle with its own inner light. Marcus had seen dragon blood before in research documentaries, but never up close. It was beautiful and alien and completely unlike anything in human biology. For a moment, doubt crept in. What was he thinking? He was a maintenance worker playing with forces he couldn't possibly understand. But then he looked at Zephyr's face, so peaceful and trusting even in unconsciousness, and remembered the desperate love in his mother's voice. This wasn't about Marcus being qualified. This was about Marcus being willing to try when everyone else had walked away. The blood analysis results appeared on the monitor within minutes, and what Marcus saw made his stomach clench. The cellular energy production was indeed compromised, but the pattern was unlike anything he had studied in school. The mitochondrial equivalent organelles in dragon cells were being systematically destroyed by what appeared to be a designer toxin. This wasn't a random poisoning. Someone had specifically engineered this compound to target dragon biology. Marcus pulled up his personal data pad and began cross-referencing the toxin's molecular structure with everything in the station's database. The poison was sophisticated, clearly the work of someone with advanced knowledge of dragon physiology. But as Marcus studied the data, he began to notice something interesting. The toxin worked by binding to specific receptor sites in dragon cells, essentially blocking the cellular machinery that converted nutrients into energy. It was elegant, targeted, and absolutely lethal. But it had one potential weakness. It was designed to work only on dragon-specific cellular structures. Marcus began running simulations, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he explored different theoretical approaches. What if the key wasn't to fight the poison directly, but to bypass it entirely? What if he could temporarily modify Zephyr's cellular energy production to use pathways that the toxin couldn't affect? It was a wild idea, the kind of thing that would take a team of specialists months to test properly. But Marcus didn't have months. He had hours at best, and a mother waiting in a storage bay who had already lost everything once. He began synthesizing a cocktail of compounds, using the station's automated medical fabrication systems to create something that had never existed before. Metabolic boosters designed for Cetian physiology, cellular repair agents used on Andromedan patients, and a binding agent that Marcus hoped would allow dragon cells to temporarily accept the foreign assistance. As he worked, Marcus found himself talking to the unconscious dragonet. "You know, Zephyr, your mom thinks humans are special because we do impossible things. I really hope she's right, because what I'm about to try is definitely impossible according to every medical textbook ever written." The treatment cocktail was ready within 2 hours, but Marcus hesitated before administering it. This was the moment of truth. Either his theory was correct, and he was about to save a life, or he was about to accidentally kill the child of one of the galaxy's most powerful species. Marcus thought about his sister back on Earth, fighting her own impossible battle against a disease that seemed determined to steal her future. He thought about all the times doctors had given him sympathetic looks and gentle words about accepting reality, and making peace with limitations. He thought about how desperately he had wished for someone, anyone, to be willing to try something crazy in the name of hope. "All right, little guy," Marcus said softly, "let's show the galaxy what impossible looks like." He administered the treatment through an 4-line, watching Zephyr's vital signs carefully as the foreign compounds entered his system. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dragonet's breathing began to deepen. Marcus held his breath, afraid to hope. But the improvement continued. Zephyr's heart rate stabilized, his blood pressure began to climb toward normal ranges. The tremor in his limbs faded, and color began to return to his scales. 20 minutes after the injection, Zephyr opened his eyes. They were the same brilliant gold as his mother's, but smaller and filled with the innocent curiosity of youth. The little dragon looked around the medical bay with wonder, then focused on Marcus with an expression that seemed to convey both gratitude and confusion. "Hello there," Marcus said gently. "I'm Marcus. I'm a friend of your mom's." Zephyr tried to speak, but only managed a small chirping sound. His vocal cords were probably still affected by the poison, but the fact that he was conscious and responsive was a miracle in itself. Marcus ran another blood test, and the results made him want to cheer out loud. The cellular energy production was still impaired, but it was recovering rapidly. His improvised treatment was actually working, using alternative metabolic pathways to keep Zephyr's cells functioning while his natural systems healed from the poison's damage. "We need to get you back to your mom," Marcus said, gently lifting Zephyr from the examination table. "She's been worried sick about you." The journey back to Storage Bay 47 felt like a victory parade, even though the corridors were empty. Zephyr was alert and looking around with bright-eyed interest, occasionally making small chirping sounds that Marcus chose to interpret as dragon baby talk. When the storage bay doors opened, the scene inside had changed dramatically. The great dragon mother was no longer curled in exhausted despair. She was pacing the length of the bay, her massive form moving with barely contained energy. The moment she saw Marcus carrying her child, she froze. "Mama," Zephyr chirped, his voice still weak, but unmistakably joyful. The reunion was something Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. The great dragon mother rushed forward with surprising grace for something so large, her eyes wide with disbelief and hope. When Marcus gently placed Zephyr on the floor, the little dragon immediately ran to his mother, who lowered her great head to nuzzle him with infinite tenderness. For several minutes, mother and child simply held each other while Marcus stood quietly to the side, feeling like he was witnessing something sacred. The dragon mother made soft rumbling sounds that were clearly dragon lullabies, while Zephyr chirped responses that needed no translation. Finally, the great dragon turned to Marcus. Her golden eyes were bright with tears that sparkled like liquid fire. "You did it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You actually did it." The medical scans showed that the poison was still active, still in his system. "How is he alive? How is he recovering?" Marcus smiled. "I couldn't neutralize the poison, so I went around instead. I gave his cells alternative ways to produce energy while his natural systems heal. It's like setting up a bypass road when the main highway is blocked." The dragon stared at him in amazement. "You created a new metabolic pathway? In 2 hours? Using equipment designed for humans?" "I had good motivation," Marcus said simply. The dragon mother was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face with those impossibly intelligent eyes. "What is your name, human?" "Marcus Chun." "Marcus Chun," she repeated, as if testing the weight of it. "My name is Seraphina, keeper of the Western Flame, diplomat of the Third Accord, and mother to this precious child. And I owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Marcus shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Any parent would have done the same thing." "Would they?" Seraphina asked quietly. "Every doctor, every medical facility, every supposed healer I approached tonight had the knowledge and equipment to save my child. But they chose not to try because he was not their species. You, with inferior equipment and no formal training in dragon physiology, succeeded where they all failed. Do you know why? Marcus thought about it. Because I wasn't thinking about him as a dragon. I was thinking about him as a child who needed help. Exactly. Seraphina's voice carried a note of something that sounded almost like reverence. This is what makes humans so remarkable. You see individuals where others see categories. You see possibilities where others see limitations. You act when others merely consider. Zephyr, who had been quietly listening to this exchange, suddenly spoke up in a voice that was stronger than before. Are all humans like you, Marcus? The question caught Marcus off guard. He thought about all the humans he knew back on Earth, struggling with their own problems, often too tired or too afraid to reach out beyond their immediate concerns. He thought about the human staff on Terminus Station, most of whom kept their heads down and focused on their own survival in a galaxy that barely tolerated their existence. No, Marcus said honestly, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the galaxy doesn't need all humans to be heroes. Maybe it just needs enough of us to be willing to help when help is needed. Seraphina nodded slowly. Wisdom beyond your years, Marcus Chun. The treatment I gave him is temporary, Marcus explained to Seraphina. It's buying time for his natural systems to heal, but he's going to need proper dragon medical care to fully recover. His cells are still processing the poison, just working around it. Seraphina nodded. I understand, but now we have time to reach proper medical facilities. Time I would not have had without your intervention. She paused, looking thoughtful. There is something else. The poison that was used on Zephyr was not random. Someone specifically targeted him, used knowledge of dragon physiology that few beings possess. This was an assassination attempt. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Someone tried to kill a child? Someone tried to kill the child of a dragon diplomat who has been working for peace between species, Seraphina corrected grimly. There are those who benefit from conflict, who profit from the continued divisions between our kinds. Zephyr's survival threatens their plans. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. By saving Zephyr, he hadn't just helped a family. He had taken sides in a galactic political conflict he didn't even know existed. What does that mean for me? He asked quietly. It means, Seraphina said, her voice taking on a protective quality, that you are now under the protection of the dragon clans. Anyone who threatens you threatens us. But it also means that there are powerful forces who will not be pleased that their plan failed. Marcus looked at Zephyr, who was now playfully chasing his own tail in a way that seemed wonderfully normal and childlike. It was hard to believe that this innocent little creature could be at the center of such dark machinations. I don't regret it, Marcus said firmly. Whatever happens next, I couldn't have walked away from him. Seraphina's eyes softened, and that, Marcus Chun, is why humans may be the key to everything. As the three of them settled in to wait for Zephyr's strength to fully return, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what he had set in motion. But every time he looked at the little dragon, healthy and happy and alive, he knew he had made the only choice he could live with. The impossible had been accomplished. Now came the hard part, dealing with the consequences. Dawn was breaking over Terminus Station when Marcus first realized they were in trouble. He had been monitoring Zephyr's recovery for 6 hours, running periodic blood tests to ensure the improvised treatment continued to work. The little dragon was almost back to full strength, chattering excitedly with his mother in a musical language that sounded like wind chimes caught in a gentle breeze. Marcus was updating his medical notes when his personal communicator buzzed with an urgent priority message. The sender was Dr. Vexthorian, the station's chief medical officer, and a Cetian who had made his disdain for human capabilities abundantly clear during Marcus's brief orientation. Maintenance worker Chun, report to Medical Bay Alpha immediately. Bring all data related to unauthorized medical procedures performed during your shift. This is not a request. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Somehow, word had gotten out about what he had done. He looked at Seraphina, who had been watching him carefully during the entire exchange. Trouble? She asked. The station administration found out about Zephyr's treatment, Marcus replied, already gathering his datapads and medical records. I might be in serious trouble for practicing medicine without proper certification. Seraphina's expression darkened. They would punish you for saving a life. Galactic medical regulations are very strict about who can treat which species, Marcus explained. Humans are only certified to provide basic care for humans. Treating alien species, especially dragons, requires specialized licenses and years of training. And if you had followed those regulations? Serafina asked pointedly. Marcus met her gaze. Zephyr would be dead. Then, these regulations are flawed, Serafina said with finality. I will accompany you to this meeting. Marcus shook his head quickly. That would make things worse. If they know you're here, they'll have to report it to the Galactic Council. There will be investigations, paperwork, political complications. Right now, this is just a disciplinary matter for a maintenance worker who overstepped his authority. You are not just a maintenance worker, Serafina said firmly. You are the being who saved my child's life when no one else would try. That makes you family, and dragons protect family. The warmth in her voice almost made Marcus smile, despite the circumstances. But he knew the political realities of the situation better than she did. Humans survived in the galactic community by staying small, staying quiet, and never making waves. What Marcus had done was the opposite of all three. Please, Marcus said, let me handle this my way. If things go badly, then we'll figure out what comes next. But for now, the best thing you can do is take Zephyr and get him to proper medical care. Serafina studied his face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. Very well. But, Marcus Chun, understand this. What happens to you matters to the Dragon clans now. If this station chooses to punish you for an act of mercy, there will be consequences. Marcus hoped it wouldn't come to that. The last thing the galaxy needed was a diplomatic incident over a human janitor who had made an unauthorized house call. The walk to Medical Bay Alpha felt like a march to his own execution. Marcus had worked so hard to build a quiet, stable life on Terminus Station. The pay was good, the work was honest, and he had been able to send money home to help with his sister's treatments. All of that was now in jeopardy because he had been unable to walk away from a dying child. Medical Bay Alpha was the station's premier medical facility, designed to treat senior species with the most advanced equipment the galaxy had to offer. Marcus had only been inside once before, during his orientation, and the sterile perfection of it had been intimidating. Now, walking into a room full of beings who considered him little more than a clever animal, it was terrifying. Dr. Thorian was waiting for him, along with three other figures Marcus didn't recognize. The chief medical officer was a Cetian, tall and thin with pale blue skin and large black eyes that never seemed to blink. His expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus could sense the barely controlled anger beneath the surface. Maintenance worker Chun, Dr. Thorian said without preamble, you were accused of practicing medicine without proper certification, using restricted medical equipment without authorization, and endangering the life of an alien being through unauthorized treatment. Do you understand the gravity of these charges? Marcus straightened his shoulders. I understand the charges, sir, but I dispute that I endangered anyone. My actions saved a life. One of the other figures in the room stepped forward. She was an Andromedan, her crystalline features sharp and angular, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance that made her species such effective negotiators. I am Counselor Nexus, representing the Galactic Medical Ethics Board, she said. We have reviewed the data you transmitted during your unauthorized procedure. Your treatment of a dragon using human medical protocols was reckless and dangerous. The fact that the subject survived is irrelevant. The potential for catastrophic harm was enormous. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. The potential for catastrophic harm was guaranteed if I did nothing. The child was dying. Every legitimate medical facility on this sector had already refused to help. Because they followed proper protocols, Dr. Thorian snapped. Because they understood their limitations and acted responsibly. You, with no training in dragon physiology, took it upon yourself to experiment on one of the galaxy's most powerful species. The political implications alone could have been devastating. The third figure spoke up. He was human, which surprised Marcus. The man was older, wearing the formal robes of a galactic legal advocate. "My name is James Henley," he said. "I've been assigned to represent human interests in this matter. Marcus, what you did was incredibly dangerous, not just for you, but for all humans in the galactic community. Our species has worked for decades to build trust and acceptance. Actions like yours threaten that progress." Marcus looked at the three beings arrayed against him and realized that this wasn't really about medical ethics or proper procedures. This was about maintaining the status quo, about keeping humans in their assigned place as useful but limited servants. "With respect, Advocate Henley," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him, "I didn't endanger human interests. I upheld human values. When we see someone in need, especially a child, we help. That's not a flaw in our character. That's what makes us human." Counselor Nexus made a sound that might have been laughter. "Human values? Your species has been in the galactic community for barely 50 years. You have no understanding of the complex balances that maintain peace between species. Your impulsive actions could have triggered a diplomatic crisis if the treatment had failed. But it didn't fail," Marcus pointed out. "It worked. A dying child is alive and healthy because I was willing to try when everyone else had given up." Dr. Thorian stepped forward, his large eyes fixed on Marcus with cold anger. "The outcome is irrelevant. You violated fundamental principles of medical practice. You used equipment you weren't trained on, treated a species you know nothing about, and administered a drug cocktail that was completely experimental. Any one of those actions could have killed the patient." Marcus met the doctor's gaze steadily. "Any one of those actions could have saved him too, and since doing nothing would have definitely killed him, I chose to try." "That was not your choice to make," Counselor Nexus said firmly. "Medical decisions must be left to qualified professionals who understand the full implications of their actions. This is exactly the kind of arrogance that makes other species distrust humans. You've been in the galactic community for barely 50 years, and already you think you know better than civilizations that have been practicing medicine for millennia." Marcus felt something snap inside him. Those civilizations with millennia of experience let a child die because they were too proud to admit that species barriers shouldn't matter when a life is at stake. If that's what millennia of experience teaches, then maybe it's time for a different perspective. The room erupted in angry voices. Dr. Thorian was speaking rapidly in his own language, probably cursing. Counselor Nexus was lecturing about the importance of established procedures. Advocate Henley was trying to get Marcus to be quiet before he made things worse. But Marcus was past caring about making things worse. He was thinking about Zephyr, bright-eyed and healthy, playing with his mother in Storage Bay 47. He was thinking about all the other beings who might be dying right now, while qualified professionals debated whether they were worth saving. "Enough," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I understand that what I did was against regulations. I understand that it threatens the comfortable order you've all built. But I don't regret it. I would do again tomorrow if I had to." The room fell silent again. Dr. Thorian was staring at Marcus with something that might have been respect, though it was hard to tell with Secian expressions. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. Counselor Nexus consulted a datapad. "You will be immediately suspended from all duties pending a full investigation. Your medical certification, such as it is, will be revoked. Depending on the outcome of the investigation, you may face criminal charges for endangering an alien life form." Marcus nodded. He had expected as much. "And if the investigation shows that my treatment was medically sound, that I actually helped rather than harmed?" "It won't matter," Dr. Thorian said bluntly. "The regulations exist for a reason. Violating them has consequences regardless of the outcome." Marcus was about to respond when alarms began sounding throughout the medical bay. Emergency lights flashed, and an automated voice began announcing a code 7 emergency. Incoming ships requiring immediate medical assistance. Dr. Thorian moved to the communication console, his anger forgotten in the face of a medical crisis. "This is Medical Bay Alpha. What's the nature of the emergency?" The response came through clearly, and Marcus felt his blood run cold. Multiple dragon casualties incoming. Apparent poisoning. ETA 10 minutes. We need immediate preparation for mass casualty treatment. The room went dead silent. Marcus looked at the three beings who had just been lecturing him about proper procedures and watched as the reality of the situation sank in. How many casualties? Dr. Thorian asked, his voice tight. 17 dragons, including several younglings. Same symptoms as the case reported last night. Whoever did this has escalated their attacks. Marcus felt sick. Someone hadn't just tried to kill Zephyr. They had tried to kill an entire group of dragons, including more children. And if the symptoms were the same, then the poison was the same, which meant the established medical protocols would be just as useless as they had been the night before. Dr. Thorian turned to stare at Marcus, and, for the first time, the Cetian's expression showed something other than disdain. The treatment you developed last night, Dr. Thorian said slowly. Would it work on multiple patients? Marcus met his gaze steadily. Yes, but administering it would require violating every regulation we just discussed. Counselor Nexus and Advocate Henley looked between Marcus and Dr. Thorian, understanding dawning on their faces. 17 lives, Marcus said quietly, including children. Do regulations matter more than that? The alarms continued to sound, counting down the minutes until the most difficult decision any of them had ever faced would have to be made. The emergency hangar of Terminus Station had never seen anything like it. 17 dragons of various sizes lay on hastily assembled medical platforms, their magnificent scales dulled by poison and pain. The largest was easily 50 feet long, while the smallest appeared to be barely older than Zephyr. The scene was heartbreaking and terrifying in equal measure. Marcus stood at the edge of the hangar, watching as teams of medical professionals from multiple species worked frantically to stabilize the patients. But he could see the fear in their movements, the hesitation that came from trying to treat beings they didn't fully understand. Every few minutes, another dragon would flatline, and the medical teams would struggle to revive them using protocols designed for their own species. Dr. Thorian approached Marcus, his usual composure cracked by the magnitude of the crisis unfolding before them. 3 have already died, he said quietly. The largest dragon, their apparent leader, has less than an hour before complete systemic failure. The younglings are failing faster. Marcus watched a small dragon, no bigger than Zephyr, convulsing on a medical platform while Andromedan doctors tried desperately to stabilize her vital signs. The sight made his chest tight with anger and helplessness. They're treating the symptoms instead of the cause, Marcus observed. Just like yesterday, they're trying to support dragon physiology using non-dragon medicine. It's not going to work. Then, tell us what will work, Dr. Thorian said, and there was something in his voice Marcus had never heard before. Humility. Marcus looked around the hangar at the assembled medical teams. Cetians, Andromedans, even a few representatives from species he didn't recognize. All of them highly trained, all of them intelligent, all of them failing because they were thinking inside the boxes of their own expertise. I need complete access to the medical fabrication systems, Marcus said. And I need teams willing to follow treatment protocols they've never seen before, using medications they don't understand, on patients they can't properly diagnose. Dr. Thorian stared at him. You're talking about performing experimental medicine on 17 dying dragons. If even one of them dies because of a treatment you designed, it could trigger a war between species. If we don't try, they'll all die anyway, Marcus pointed out. At least this way, some of them might live. The debate might have continued, but it was interrupted by commotion near the largest dragon. The massive creature had regained consciousness and was trying to speak, despite the medical equipment restricting his movement. Marcus approached carefully, aware that he was looking at a being who could incinerate him with a single breath. But the great dragon's eyes, though clouded with pain, were intelligent and desperate. My children, the dragon whispered, his voice like distant thunder. Please, my children are dying. Marcus looked at the smaller dragons scattered throughout the hangar and understood. This wasn't just a random group that had been poisoned together. This was a family. We're going to help them, Marcus said firmly. I promise you, we're going to save as many as we can. The dragon's eyes focused on Marcus with difficulty. You are human. Why would you help dragons? The question hung in the air, and Marcus realized that every being in the hangar was listening for his answer. This was about more than medical treatment now. This was about what kind of galaxy they all wanted to live in. Because they're children, Marcus said simply. Because you're a parent watching your family die. Because if we can't help each other when it matters most, then all our advanced technology and sophisticated civilization means nothing. The dragon studied Marcus's face for a long moment. Then, with great effort, he lifted his massive head. I am Draconis, Lord of the Eastern Reaches, father to 7 of these younglings. If you can save my children, the dragon clans will owe humans a debt that spans generations. Marcus felt the weight of that promise, but also the terrible responsibility it represented. He turned to Dr. Thorian, who had been listening to the exchange with growing amazement. I need your authorization to proceed, Marcus said. And I need your best staff to help implement the treatment. Dr. Thorian looked around the hangar at the dying dragons, then back at Marcus. You realize that if this goes wrong, both our careers are over. Probably our lives as well. And if we don't try, 17 dragons die, including children, while we watch and do nothing, Marcus replied. Which outcome can you live with? For a moment, Dr. Thorian said nothing. Then he straightened his shoulders and spoke in a voice that carried throughout the hangar. All medical teams, report to the human maintenance worker for treatment protocols. We are implementing experimental procedures under emergency authorization. The next 2 hours were the most intense of Marcus's life. Working with teams of medical professionals who had never collaborated across species lines, he directed the synthesis and administration of his improvised treatment on a scale he had never imagined possible. The challenge wasn't just medical, it was logistical and psychological. Each dragon required a slightly different formulation based on their size and the progression of the poison. The medical teams had to overcome their own training and trust protocols they didn't understand. And through it all, Marcus had to project confidence he didn't feel while improvising solutions to problems he had never encountered. Dr. Thorian proved invaluable, translating Marcus's human-centric explanations into terms the other species could understand and follow. Counselor Nexus, initially resistant, became his most effective advocate when she realized that Marcus's approach was actually working. The first sign of success came from one of the younglings. A small dragon about Zephyr's age suddenly opened her eyes and let out a weak but unmistakable chirp of confusion. Within minutes, her vital signs stabilized, and she was trying to sit up on her medical platform. It's working, Dr. Thorian whispered, staring at the monitoring equipment in amazement. The treatment is actually working. One by one, the dragons began to recover. The larger ones took longer, their systems having sustained more damage, but even Draconis showed significant improvement within the first hour of treatment. But success brought new problems. As the dragons regained consciousness, they became agitated and confused. Several tried to use their natural fire abilities, triggering emergency containment protocols. The largest dragons were strong enough to break free from the medical restraints that had been designed for smaller species. We need to calm them down, Marcus realized. They're scared and disoriented. In this state, they could accidentally hurt themselves or others. Draconis, now conscious enough to understand what was happening, raised his great head. Children, he called in the musical dragon language. Be still. These beings are helping us. We are safe. The effect was immediate. The smaller dragons settled down, looking to their father for guidance. But Marcus could see the questions in their eyes, the confusion about why aliens were helping them when their own kind had been absent. As the medical crisis stabilized, Marcus became aware that word of what was happening had spread throughout the station. The hangar's observation galleries were filled with beings from dozens of species, all watching the unprecedented cooperation between humans and dragons. Among the observers, Marcus spotted a figure that made his blood run cold. Admiral Vex Corthan, a serpentoid military commander known for his hardline stance against interspecies cooperation. The Admiral's presence here could only mean one thing. Someone very powerful was taking an interest in these events. Dr. Thorian noticed Marcus's expression and followed his gaze. "Admiral Corthan," he murmured. "This complicates things significantly." Marcus was about to ask why when Advocate Henley appeared at his side, looking more nervous than Marcus had ever seen him. "Marcus," Henley said quietly, "we need to talk. Privately." Now, Marcus looked at the dragons, most of whom were now stable, but still requiring monitoring. "I can't leave them. They need you alive and free," Henley interrupted. "Admiral Corthan has evidence that you violated the Biological Weapons Treaty by developing an unauthorized chemical compound. He's here to arrest you." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Biological weapons? I was treating poison victims. The Admiral's legal team is arguing that your treatment constitutes an unregulated biological agent capable of affecting multiple species, Henley explained grimly. Under the treaty, developing such compounds without proper authorization is a capital offense. Marcus felt the world spinning around him. That's insane. I was saving lives. Intent doesn't matter under the treaty, Henley said. Only the technical specifications of what you created. And, technically, you did develop a multi-species biological compound without authorization. Marcus looked at the recovering dragons, at Draconis, who was watching him with growing concern, at Dr. Thorian, whose expression was shifting from gratitude to alarm. "How long before they move to arrest me?" Marcus asked. "Admiral Corthan is waiting for the dragons to be stable enough that arresting you won't cause their condition to deteriorate," Henley replied. "He's trying to minimize the diplomatic fallout. But once he's satisfied they're out of danger, you're going to be taken into custody." Marcus nodded, understanding the cruel irony. His success in saving the dragons had signed his own death warrant. By proving that his treatment worked, he had also proven that he was capable of creating biological compounds that could theoretically be weaponized. "There might be a way out of this," Henley said hesitantly. "If you were to voluntarily submit to memory erasure, they might commute the charges. You would lose all knowledge of how you developed the treatment, but you would live." The suggestion felt like a slap. Erase my memory? So that the next time someone is poisoned, we're back to watching children die while doctors debate regulations. "It's better than execution," Henley pointed out. Marcus looked around the hangar one more time. The dragons were alive, healthy, safe. Whatever happened to him now, he had proven that the impossible was possible when people were willing to try. "No," Marcus said firmly. "If they want to charge me with saving lives, then let them explain that to the galaxy. I won't erase what I've learned just to make their legal system more comfortable." Before Henley could respond, a commotion erupted near the hangar entrance. Admiral Corthan was approaching with a full security detail, clearly ready to make his arrest. But his path was suddenly blocked by something unexpected. Seraphina and Zephyr had arrived, along with what appeared to be a dozen other dragons of various sizes. They formed a protective line between the Admiral and Marcus, their expressions making it clear that anyone who wanted to reach the human would have to go through them first. "Admiral Corthan," Seraphina said, her voice carrying across the hangar with crystalline clarity. "I trust you have a very good reason for threatening the being who saved my child's life." The Admiral stopped, clearly not having expected dragon interference. "This is a matter of galactic security, Lady Seraphina. The human has violated the Biological Weapons Treaty. By healing the sick," Seraphina asked, her tone dangerously calm. "By saving the lives of 17 dragons when no one else would try? If that is your definition of a weapons violation, then perhaps the treaty needs revision." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude and terror. Seraphina was risking a diplomatic incident to protect him, but her intervention could make things worse for everyone. "Lady Seraphina," Marcus called out, "thank you, but I can handle this. I don't want to cause problems between dragons and the Galactic Council." Serafina turned to look at him, her golden eyes blazing with something that might have been pride. Marcus Chun, you have already caused problems. You have forced the galaxy to confront its own prejudices and failures. Now we must all decide what kind of future we want to build. Admiral Corthan stepped forward, his hand resting on his sidearm. Lady Serafina, I respect your gratitude to this human, but the law is clear. He must face justice for his actions. Then, let him face dragon justice. A new voice rumbled through the hangar. Draconis had risen to his feet, his massive form towering over everyone present. By ancient law, any being who saves the life of a Dragon Clan member is entitled to claim sanctuary within our protection. Marcus Chun has saved not one life, but 18. He is now under the protection of two great houses. The standoff that followed would be remembered as the moment everything changed. On one side, the established galactic order represented by Admiral Corthan and his enforcement powers. On the other, an ancient dragon law backed by beings powerful enough to reshape star systems. And, in the middle, a human janitor who had simply refused to let children die. The next move would determine not just Marcus's fate, but the future relationship between every species in the galaxy. The silence in the hangar stretched like a hell breath. Admiral Corthan stood frozen between two impossible choices: enforce galactic law against the expressed will of two dragon great houses, or allow a precedent that could undermine the authority structure that held the galaxy together. Marcus found himself at the center of a moment that felt larger than any one life. Around him, representatives of dozens of species watched and waited to see which force would prove stronger: the rigid order of established law or the ancient power of dragon protection. It was Zephyr who broke the stalemate. The little dragon, still weak from his ordeal but determined to be part of this moment, stepped forward from behind his mother's protective bulk. His young voice carried clearly across the silent hangar. Admiral Corthan, Zephyr said, his pronunciation careful and precise. May I ask you a question? The Admiral looked down at the small dragon with visible confusion. Protocol had no guidance for being questioned by a dragon child in the middle of a legal arrest. I suppose that would be appropriate, Admiral Corthan said slowly. Zephyr tilted his head with the innocent curiosity that only the very young possessed. If your child was dying and someone could save them but wasn't supposed to because of rules, what would you want them to do? The question hung in the air with devastating simplicity. Around the hangar, Marcus could see beings of every species shifting uncomfortably as they confronted the core moral issue that all the legal complexity had obscured. Admiral Corthan stared at the little dragon for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than Marcus had ever heard it. I would want them to save my child, even if it was against the rules. Zephyr persisted. Even if it was against the rules, the Admiral admitted quietly. Zephyr nodded, as if this had confirmed something important. Then, he looked around the hangar at all the assembled beings. Marcus saved me when I was dying. He saved my daddy, and all my cousins too. If that's against the rules, then maybe the rules are wrong. The innocent wisdom of those words seemed to ripple through the crowd. Marcus saw beings of different species looking at each other with new understanding, as if seeing the situation clearly for the first time. Dr. Thorian stepped forward, his medical authority lending weight to his words. Admiral, I have reviewed Marcus Chin's medical protocols in detail. What he accomplished was not weapons development. It was brilliant improvisation under impossible circumstances. He created targeted therapies that save lives while working with equipment designed for an entirely different species. Counselor Nexus joined him, her crystalline features reflecting the light in patterns that indicated deep thought. The Galactic Medical Ethics Board will be conducting a full review of our treatment protocols based on what we witnessed here today. It appears our regulations may have become so focused on preventing harm that they were actually causing it. Admiral Corthan looked around the hangar, taking in the recovered dragons, the mixed-species medical teams that had worked together successfully, and the expectant faces of beings from across the galaxy. Marcus could see the calculation behind his eyes as he weighed political realities against legal requirements. "There is another consideration," Serafina said quietly, though her voice carried to every corner of the hangar. "The investigation into who poisoned these dragons is ongoing. We have evidence that it was orchestrated by beings who profit from interspecies conflict. They wanted us dead precisely because we represent cooperation between species." She fixed Admiral Corthan with a stare that seemed to see straight through him. "By arresting the being who saved us, you would be completing their work for them. You would be sending the message that mercy is punishable, that crossing species lines to save lives is a crime. Is it the galaxy you wish to create?" Draconis rumbled agreement, his massive form somehow conveying both threat and wisdom. "The dragon clans have been distant from galactic politics for too long. We have allowed fear and pride to keep us isolated. But this human has shown us that isolation serves no one. Perhaps it is time for change." Marcus felt the weight of history pressing down on the moment. This wasn't just about his fate anymore. This was about whether the galaxy would choose growth over stagnation, cooperation over rigid hierarchy. Admiral Corthan was quiet for a long time, studying the faces around him. Finally, he spoke. "Marcus Chun, you are guilty of violating the Biological Weapons Treaty. That is a legal fact that cannot be disputed." Marcus felt his heart sink, but the Admiral wasn't finished. "However," Corthan continued, "you are also guilty of saving 18 lives at great personal risk, of demonstrating that interspecies medical cooperation is not only possible, but essential, and of showing moral courage that shames those of us who chose procedure over compassion." The Admiral removed his hand from his sidearm. "Under my authority as Galactic Security Enforcement, I am hereby classifying your treatment protocols as emergency medical procedures rather than biological weapons. The Galactic Council will review the Biological Weapons Treaty to ensure that future life-saving innovations are not criminalized." A collective sigh of relief swept through the hangar, but Admiral Corthan raised a hand for silence. "This is not a simple pardon," he continued. "Marcus Chun, you are hereby appointed as the first human-dragon medical liaison, with full authority to develop cross-species treatment protocols under the supervision of both human and dragon medical authorities. Your work will be closely monitored, but it will be legal." Marcus stared at the Admiral in shock. "I'm not qualified for that kind of position. I'm just a maintenance worker." "You are the being who accomplished what trained professionals said was impossible." Draconis rumbled with something that sounded like amusement. "If that does not qualify you, then qualification means nothing." Dr. Thorian stepped forward with an expression Marcus had never seen before: respect. "The position would come with full medical training, of course. Both human and dragon physiology, advanced pharmacology, emergency medicine. It would take years of study. But at the end," Serafina added, her voice warm with possibility, "there would be someone who could bridge the gap between species when medical crises arise. Someone who thinks outside the boundaries that limit others." Marcus looked around the hangar at all the faces watching him expectantly. Dragons and humans, Cetians and Andromedans, beings from across the galaxy who had witnessed something unprecedented and were now being asked to trust in its continuation. "What about the people who poison the dragons?" Marcus asked. "What happens to them?" Admiral Corthan's expression hardened. "That investigation is ongoing, but I can tell you this. What happened here today has already disrupted their plans significantly. They counted on species remaining isolated, on medical barriers preventing cooperation. Your actions have proven that those barriers can be overcome." Serafina nodded agreement. "The dragon clans are no longer content to remain separate from galactic affairs. We will be taking a more active role in ensuring that cooperation prevails over conflict." Zephyr, who had been quietly listening to this adult conversation, suddenly chirped up with a question that made everyone smile. "Does this mean Marcus is part of our family now?" Serafina's expression softened as she looked down at her child. "In every way that matters, yes. The dragon clans have adopted Marcus Chun as one of our own. He will always have a place with us. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. 6 months ago, he had been a desperate human trying to earn enough money to help his sister. Now he was being offered a chance to revolutionize interspecies medicine, backed by some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. I accept, Marcus said simply. But I have one condition. Admiral Corthan raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to make conditions. Marcus smiled. I want my work to be freely shared. Every breakthrough, every protocol, every innovation, it all goes into the public database. No species restrictions, no political barriers. If we're going to do this, we do it for everyone. Draconis let out a sound that might have been laughter. Spoken like a true human, always thinking of others first. It will be done, Admiral Corthan said formally. The Marcus Chan protocols will be freely available to all species for the treatment of cross-species medical emergencies. As the crowd in the hangar began to disperse, Marcus found himself surrounded by the dragons he had saved. Young and old, they approached him one by one to express their gratitude in their musical language. Even without understanding the words, Marcus could feel the emotion behind them. Dr. Thorian lingered as the others left. Marcus, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I was so focused on regulations and procedures that I lost sight of why we practice medicine in the first place. Marcus shook his head. You don't owe me anything, Dr. Thorian. You backed me when it mattered most. That took courage. No, the Seishan replied. Courage was walking into that storage bay last night when you could have simply reported it and walked away. Courage was treating a dying dragon child when you had no idea if it would work. What I did was much easier. As the medical bay emptied, Marcus found himself alone with Seraphina and Zephyr. The great dragon mother looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude, pride, and something deeper. You know, Seraphina said thoughtfully, when I first heard about humans joining the galactic community, I thought they were just another species seeking advantage through association with greater powers. Maybe some of us are, Marcus admitted. We're not perfect. No, Seraphina agreed. But you have something that many species lose as they become more advanced, the willingness to see individuals instead of categories, to respond to need instead of protocol. That may be the most valuable thing you bring to the galaxy. Zephyr, who had been playing with a medical scanner, suddenly looked up with bright eyes. Marcus, will you teach me human medicine so I can help beings like you help me? Marcus knelt down to the little dragon's eye level. I'll teach you everything I can, Zephyr. But you're going to teach me things too. About dragon physiology, about how your species sees the universe, about being brave enough to ask for help when you need it. As Marcus looked at Zephyr's eager face, he thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple choice to respond to a cry for help, but it had become something much larger. It had become proof that the galaxy's greatest challenges could be overcome when beings chose cooperation over isolation, compassion over protocol. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his new laboratory aboard the Dragon Research vessel Harmony's wing. The facility was a joint project between human and dragon engineers, designed specifically for cross-species medical research. Through the vast viewports, he could see Terminus Station growing smaller as they departed for their first official mission, investigating reports of a mysterious illness affecting multiple species in the Outer Rim territories. Ready for our first official case, Dr. Chun? Seraphina asked, using his new title with obvious pride. Marcus looked around the laboratory filled with equipment from a dozen different species, staffed by a medical team that represented the galaxy's commitment to cooperation. On a smaller medical bed designed specifically for young dragons, Zephyr was practicing basic diagnostic procedures under the watchful eye of Dr. Thorian, who had requested transfer to the project. Ready, Marcus said, and he meant it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together. Human ingenuity and dragon wisdom, combined with the contributions of every species willing to work toward a better galaxy. The impossible had become possible. Now, they would discover what other impossibilities were waiting to be conquered by those brave enough to try. As Harmony's wing entered hyperspace, carrying its mixed-species crew toward their next adventure. Marcus chin smiled. He was no longer just a janitor who had stumbled into heroism. He was a bridge between worlds, a proof that the galaxy's greatest strength lay not in the power of individual species, but in their willingness to help each other when help was needed most. The universe was vast and full of challenges, but it was also full of beings capable of extraordinary compassion when they chose to act on it. And that, Marcus had learned, made all the difference in the cosmos.